Hi, I'm Linda Quinlan.
I'm Keith Ghostland.
And I'm Ann Charles. Welcome to All Things LGBTQ. It's Tuesday, December 5th, and we have a lot of news for you today.
And now for the national headlines. Conservative host Alex Jones says lesbians torture women and eat their brains. I'm not kidding. Log cabin Republicans release a Ray Moore ad. Trump insults LGBT community on World AIDS Day and also leaves out both the LGBT community and people of color. Anthony Rapp tweets about the hate he's received since he accused Kevin Spacey. A father almost slits the throat of his son because he's gay. Blake Fathenhold of Texas, a family values politician. Most of us have heard about the Colorado cake story, but it's here again. Roy Moore, once again, yes, he co-authored a textbook warning of the evil of women who run for office and that Christians have a moral obligation to vote for a man. Jim Nabors dies at 87. Another trans woman of color is murdered. Baptist threatens to expel churches if they knowingly hire LGBTQ people. Joy Reid. And an article about the young man who stabbed a student and a little bit about his story and why he says that happened. Thor, Ragnarok, the movie, and Kim and Kim, a comic book. So, on to local.
Local. But first I want to know, is the eating the brains with or without the hollandaise sauce?
I like ranch myself.
And I'm deferring because she would know. Local headlines. Justin, he issued an apology, and he's giving money. Vermont joins the suit in opposition to 45's administrative rule allowing people to opt out of insurance coverage for contraception.
Oh.
There's a sentencing in the second of the Amy Beatty-related murder trials. There was also sentencing in a South Burlington hate crime case. UVM Medical Center. Apparently they haven't been hospitable to people who are deaf and hearing impaired.
Really?
They may have reached a settlement after multiple complaints. December 1st was World AIDS Day. The epidemic isn't over. And this week's trivia question. This was the first major American film to deal with AIDS.
And Ann got it wrong.
So did I.
I had no idea. So on to international news.
All right. My international headlines include gay marriage in Austria approved by a constitutional court. This just happened this very day. Romania gay marriage case could have outsized impact on Europe. Gender-neutral marriages entered into abroad are not valid in Estonia. The Association of Gays, Lesbians in Ghana to embark on a historic peace march in Accra. Death in Pakistan, no one seems to care. Moscow police failed to effectively investigate a brutal attack on LGBT activists, 2 lesbians in particular. A Costa Rican jurist, Victor Madrigal Borlos, appointed the new UN independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity. We have a picture of him, because I'm probably not going to get to this story. Police arrest woman in Tanzania over video of same-sex kiss. 2 gay men arrested in Uzbekistan and face charges of engaging in illegal sexual relations. Egypt jails 16 for debauchery as the LGBT crackdown there continues. So I'm not going to get to all of these stories, but these are the headlines.
And what I haven't said for a while is not debauched as long as you're doing it properly.
All right. So,
With or without hollandaise.
I know. So my first story is really, and this is not made up, but it's rather bizarre. But anyway, radio host Alex Jones said lesbians torture women and eat their brains. He went on a bizarre rant in which he accused liberal lesbians, not just lesbians, liberal lesbians, of wanting to abuse women. Most of the so-called liberal lesbians just want a guy with a duck-ass haircut and a James Bond look. They want to be slapping girls around. I'm not blaming all lesbians, the commentator said, but it goes to show that these butch lesbians, liberal
And butch.
yes,
I think they're an endangered species, actually.
they want to be the guy smashing the hot chicks around. They think it's manly. Women, now this is another thing. Women actually want to be domestic violence victims.
Oh,
And since men refuse to abuse them,
oh my gosh.
straight women look for lesbians that are willing to hit them.
It just makes you go, duh?
He then did an impression of brain-eating lesbians, all the while saying, I've got power, I love Satan. So,
Oh my gosh.
I know, isn't that incredible?
So you're demonic, butch, and liberal.
Yeah.
All righty. I see T-shirts coming.
God, I think we should have T-shirts, lesbian eat brains. Anyway, the Log Cabin Republicans release a Roy Moore ad in Alabama. And it's an anti-Roy Moore ad, using the same kind of techniques as the Christian values people use. You know, it starts out as very religious and, you know, blah, 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 and then it says that, you know, he shouldn't be. That Moore's myopic faith prevents him from seeing that a significant number of LGBTQ people are devout Christians themselves. So that was kind of interesting. Anthony Rapp, the man who outed Kevin Spacey as an abuser when he was 14 years old and Spacey was 26, says that he has had death threats and a lot of tweets. And in fact, he showed some of the tweets on the internet, and some of them were pretty vicious. So that was interesting. And then a father almost slits the throat of his son because he was gay. And his mother told him to clean himself up so the school wouldn't see his injuries. In Mills, Wyoming, the father is accused of attacking his 15-year-old son. The boy says his parents got drunk, they started to fight, he went to bed. The next thing he knows, his father is on top of him screaming, and he, you know, he's full of bruises and his throat is cut. He's not terribly injured, I mean, in the sense that he's, you know, going to die, but, and then the mother comes in and she says, you know, please, stop this, whatever. She stops it. But then she says to her son that the next day, clean yourself up because we don't want the authorities at school, because if they find out and your father goes to jail, we'll have no place to live. So anyway, the school authorities call the authorities, and the parents are being charged with injuring the boy. So, you know, that's a very sad story for this 15-year-old who knows he now, you know, he won't have any parents if they both go to prison, but sad story.
Well, it also highlights, there was a study that was just released this week that LGBTQ youth have 150% higher risk of becoming homeless
Yeah.
because of gender identity and social and sexual orientation. This shows you why.
Yeah, it's terrible. And Blake Farthenhold, a Republican from Texas, a family values politician, settled a harassment case for $84,000 to a former employee. And just to tell you, this is our tax money. He used our tax money to pay this woman who he told that she made him have wet dreams and, whatever.
Okay, more detail than I really wanted.
Exactly,
know.
too much
Ready.
information.
And then she sued because he fired her because she said she didn't appreciate his behavior. So that's Blake Farenthold, Republican of Texas. And on to you, sir.
I don't know how you follow that up, but as we've talked about on previous shows, the pink scare during the 50s, and actually in Canada went on to 1992, where people who were identified as LGBTQ were deemed as a security risk. So you were not allowed to serve in the military, you were dishonorably discharged, your employment record was so identified and you became unemployable. As opposed to what we may be experiencing here in Canada, they actually issued an apology that said, "It is my hope that in talking about these injustices, vowing to never repeat them, and acting to right these wrongs, we can begin to heal." That was the statement from Premier Justin Trudeau. But they went a little further. The Canadian government has allocated $110 million for those people who were unjustly persecuted during that time for compensation. And they're also allocated $15 million to create a monument to identify what had happened, that it was wrong, and to ensure this does not happen again.
Oh, Canada.
Look into your heritage so you know your immigration rights. 45, because he's up late at night and
He has nothing else to do.
wants to know how he can muck things up, had issued an executive order so that corporations did not have to include contraceptive as part of health insurance. T.J. Donovan and 19 other state attorney generals have filed suit saying that's not right. That what he has done and the manner in which he has done it is unconstitutional. It violates the Affordable Care Act and was implemented without proper procedure. And the estimate is that this potentially could impact as many as 62 million women.
Easily.
Well, and these are people
Yeah.
who currently have a no copay for contraceptives as part of their health insurance. He wants to be the one grabbing it, and there we are. So we've talked in the past about the Amos Beatty beating and murder that occurred in Burlington 2 years ago. The second case has reached an agreement. What was significant about this case, or this particular one, and there are 3 more still to come, is that this individual, this young woman, was identified as being the instigator of the act itself, and that her statements and actions or what drove this incident to become as violent as it was. She's been sentenced to 10 years in jail. One of the things reading about this that stood out for me is that she issued an apology to Amos Beatty's family, and the judge made the comment of what she did was horrific, it's heinous, it's probably one of the worst attacks and homicides I've ever seen. No number of years will ever bring Amos back. And then went on to say, there is no apology for something like this.
No.
So now you've got some real uplifting stuff for
Well,
us.
I start with uplifting and then it goes downhill a little bit.
As opposed to the Hollandaise with the brains, yeah.
Gay marriage in Austria has been approved this very day. The top court has ruled that current laws are discriminatory and must be lifted by 2019. Same-sex couples have so far only been afforded registered partnerships. Since 2010, with nearly the same rights as married couples. But the court ruled that the distinction between marriage and registered partnership cannot be upheld in this day and age without discriminating against same-sex couples. Actually, if couples have argued for same-sex marriage and brought suit, they can be married before January 1st, 2019.
Would that be the people who are already on the register?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. The court ruled on the issue after 2 women in a registered civil partnership went to court after they were denied the right to marry by authorities in the capital of Vienna. We are very happy, Homosexual Initiative Vienna chairman Christian Hogel told Reuters news agency. We want to use the opportunity for a renewed call for a fundamental reform of marriage. Austria has lagged behind several of its Western European neighbors in approving same-sex marriage. Even Germany approved it in the run-up to last year's general election, as we reported here. So that's very good news from Austria.
Didn't you say, like Austria, they didn't really want marriage because it was so complicated, or that the marriage laws were so complicated? Was that Austria, or was that someplace else?
It might have been Australia. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
recall.
Yeah, okay.
But I would like to move on to Romania,
Okay.
where a gay marriage case could have an outsized impact on Europe. The European Union's highest court began examining a case on Tuesday over a Romanian man's attempt to get legal residency for his American husband, a closely watched hearing that will have major implications for the legal recognition of same-sex relationships across Europe. The case, legal experts say, could determine whether same-sex partners are afforded some of the same benefits and rights available to heterosexual spouses across the 28-member European Union, irrespective of the country's stance on same-sex marriage. The case before the court involves Adrian Coleman, and we have a picture of him, a Romanian rights activist, and his American partner, Claiborne Robert Hamilton. They were married in Belgium in 2010, 7 years after Belgium legalized same-sex marriage, while a further 9 member states of the European Union have civil unions or something similar. European Union laws give citizens of the bloc's member states and their family members the right to move freely across the region, subject to certain conditions. But authorities said that when the couple tried to move to Romania, authorities in Bucharest refused to recognize their relationship for the purpose of residency. Now they live in the U.S., but if the court rules in their favor, the impact could be considerable, not just for them. It would effectively force Romania and 5 other countries, as well as any country that joins the European Union in the future, to grant same-sex couples who've been married elsewhere residency and working rights, as long as one of them is an EU citizen. I grew up here, and I still refer to Romania as my home country, Mr. Coleman said, as the case is progressing through Romania's legal system. Sooner or later, I'll be back. The eventual verdict, which won't be known for several months, will occur. He's optimistic about it. Homosexuality was decriminalized in Romania in 2001, but same-sex marriage remains a contentious issue in the country because of the majority Orthodox Christian population. In early 2016, 3 million Romanians out of the population of roughly 20 million signed a petition calling for a constitutional definition of marriage to be altered from a union between 2 spouses to one specifically between a man and a woman. So this case is pending in Romania, and if the courts rule in the favor of this same-sex couple, the effect would be widespread.
What would be the chances of that?
I don't know. He's optimistic.
Good, good, good.
I mean, 3 million people signing a petition
It's pretty good.
against 20 million.
Yeah.
Now, Estonia. I have a picture of two lesbians in Estonia. Their names are Sarah and Christina Raud.
There are two lesbians in Estonia?
That's right, although one is really U.S. But there's a picture of them kissing.
Oh, there's only one then.
Well, no. She's from the U.S., but they're hoping to reside in Estonia. But the Tallinn District Court has overturned an administrative court ruling from January that ordered the Police Border Guard Board to issue a fixed-term residence permit to a U.S. woman who married a woman from Estonia. The court found that since it's impossible for same-sex persons to marry in Estonia, the marriage cannot be seen as valid. Estonia has passed a Registered Partnership Act that allows two people to enter into a partnership agreement irrespective of their genders. But Sarah and Christina Raud want their marriage to be recognized. They don't want to apply to be nondescript registered partners. So the courts are considering that.
It's like contracting with a vendor to provide a service. Mm-hmm. It's a business contract.
In that case, to which you refer is being heard today.
All righty.
And back to, speaking of marriage, and we have the cake. And isn't that in the Supreme Court now?
Yeah, they
Right.
argued this morning.
They're arguing
Yes,
this morning, yes. Well,
They didn't bring samples.
One of my commentators said, "Let me get the cake off my plate."
that's a good one. Anyway, this ruling could have a really big effect on the LGBT community and our rights. And this is a case that, really could wreck our lives in many ways. And if the bakery wins, a whole lot of different businesses could gain a constitutional right to discriminate against lots of people, which include LGBTQ people, people of color, Jews, religious minorities. And so this is a really important case, and we need to keep our eye on that.
And they're not expecting a ruling until June.
And everyone's
Right.
speculating, and people are saying, "Don't speculate."
I know.
Oh, Anthony Kennedy is the.
Well, we don't have a good foothold in the Supreme Court, so
And people are talking about the Hobby Lobby
yeah.
decision, but
Those people.
who knows?
Those are the ones who bought the Ark. Remember the Ark?
I have no comment.
Anyway, this was pretty interesting. Joy Reid, the host of MSNBC, apologized on Sunday for insensitive, tone deaf, and dumb blog posts that contained homophobic insults
What'd
and
she
jokes
say?
targeting then Florida Governor Charlie Crist.
What did she
I
say?
think she referred to him as Miss Thing.
Yeah. Anyway, in the post, which appeared on a blog associated with her now defunct Florida radio show, The Reid Report from 2007 to 2009, recently surfaced on Twitter. Reid reportedly mocked Christie.
No,
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 Chris Christie
Charlie
was New
Crist,
Joy.
sorry.
Charlie Crist.
Yeah, Charlie Crist. As a closeted gay man nicknamed Miss Charlie. And tag post about him under gay politicians. She also just suggested that the Republican governor refused to come out as gay because he thought it would hurt his political career, and joked about him having had sex with Senator McCain.
oh my!
You're talking about wet dreams, you're mentioning names.
The gossip
know
is
it.
I'm going to
endless.
be celibate for months now. You know that. Okay.
At no time I intentionally sought to demean or harm the LGBT community, which includes people whom I deeply love, Reid said in a statement released on Sunday. My goal is my ham-handed way was to call out potential hypocrisy. So that's... And then there's a story, actually it was written by Andy Hum in the Gay News about...
Gay City News.
No, City News.
Gay
The Gay
City
City
News.
News, correct. Gay City News.
Which
About...
you may have read recently while you were in New York.
I was.
I know.
Yeah. It's about Abel Sadino, the bullied Bronx gay teen charged with manslaughter in the death of classmate Matthew McCree. I guess he was pretty brutally, tortured and
Bullied.
bullied his whole life. And, he said he was scared and nervous to go back into society, given the boys, he said, he defended himself against, hang out with a crowd that claimed to be in gangs and made gang signs. When the incident happened, I feared for my life. For all I know, McCree said, I could have had a gun and shot me. He could have had a gun and shot me right there. Or he could have had a knife or a stun gun. They kept punching me, even when I was defending myself. They were still punching once school security separated us 5 minutes later. This is an interesting thing, that the two teachers in the classroom did nothing to intervene. And so...
Makes you want to charge them as an accessory.
Yeah. And,
Although one kid got killed, the
Yeah.
bully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so one boy died and the other was fatally wounded. So, bullying,
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is great because I went to see this movie with my grandsons and my son, and it was called Thor Ragnarok, the fun movie. Now, I didn't know this beforehand, but if I had known this, I would have had a much different take. But in the area where it falters, the movie, is with Valkyrie. Not because of characterization, because she's just a great kick-ass and engaging, as the rest of the cast. But I think it's
Valkyrie?
Valkyrie, was meant to be bisexual. And to ensure the identity in the film is profoundly disappointing. So I got no idea that this character was supposed to be bisexual.
The Wagnerian
Yeah.
opera, remember the Valkyries?
Yeah,
That's them.
yeah.
So that's the background.
Yeah.
I didn't know the Valkyries were bisexual. I'm not an opera.
Fan.
I don't know about opera.
Me either.
But they're mythological too, aren't they? Norse myths?
Yeah, see, I know nothing
Valhalla.
about this. So what is it?
The
They're
Valkyrie-
bisexual?
The Valkyries, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You'd be amazed at how many of the characters in mythology of you give me the opportunity and I'll take it.
Okay, but if I had known this when I went to see the movie, it would have even added more fun, but I didn't, so.
It's like Wonder Woman is bisexual.
Yeah, but they don't show that either in that film. Never mind, don't get me started about that film.
No, we don't like that.
Kim and Kim, a comic book written by Visaggio, with art from Eva Cabrera and Claudia Aguirre, and lettering from Zach Zam, follows the punk rock life of best friends Kim Quarto and Kim Danzler, who've teamed up as the bounty hunting group for fighting Kims to go on a big intergalactic road trip and make some cash along the way.
This is a movie or
No, this is
Comic
a
book.
comic book? Sorry.
You know how she's into comic books?
But beyond the sci-fi shenanigans and heroic quests the Kims go on, Kim and Kim is an LGBTQ positive series that features a richly diverse cast of characters, including both the Kims, one of whom is trans, and hugely important for Visaggio to write, as she is undergoing her own transition process. So,
All right.
there for the comic books. I love comic books.
So I know.
All right.
So there was another case that went through the court in Chittenden County. This was centering around an incident in South Burlington. And as people may recall, South Burlington High School, particularly the football team, their name was Rebel, the Rebels. And there was a whole controversy about the implications
recall.
and changing it. And it ultimately was changed to the Wolves. However, there was an incident that occurred where one of the students did racist graffiti on the side of the school, directed towards a specific other student who was a student of color. Now, originally, the charge was looked at as being felony, unlawful mischief, misdemeanor, aggravated disorderly conduct with hate crime enhancement. Could have faced up to 7 years. But what happened is that he agreed to do restitution, to clean up what he had done. He also did 50 hours of community service. And what was interesting about the 50 hours of community service is that his father helped to coordinate the service, and it was with the Association of Africans Living in America. So here was this privileged white youth, racist graffiti, and then is actually providing services to and with the people to whom he had targeted.
Wow.
And apparently from the statement made at the time of the hearing and the plea agreement, it had a profound impact on him. So, I mean, it's the type of outcome that you always hope for, but very rarely get. UVM Medical Center. And from doing training about the Americans with Disabilities Act, people who are deaf and hearing impaired, when they go into an emergency room, most times the emergency rooms really don't know how to respond. You know, most people like to put things in writing and then hand the note. Well, if sign language is your primary mode of communication, written words don't have the same meaning that you might think it does. And what was happening is UVM expected people to use like iPads and their phones to do remote interpretation.
Oh my gosh.
If you've ever watched someone using sign, trying to incorporate it on a screen this large. And also, one of the complaints, and it went with the federal attorney, frequently the devices didn't work. So they have settled the case. They have promised that they're going to improve their services.
By
They're
getting
going to
interpreters?
be more responsive. The Agency of Human Services has a list of interpreters.
Yes.
And this was the statement from the U.S. Attorney, Christina Nolan. Being able to communicate effectively with medical providers is fundamental to meaningfully accessing health care.
Yep.
This resolution agreement demonstrates their office's commitment to protecting the civil rights. You would have thought it was a no-brainer, but there we are. December 1st was World AIDS Day. People are still being infected. In the U.S., there are over 50,000 new diagnoses a year. And this is where the CDC still estimates that 1 in 5 people who are HIV positive don't know it.
Wow.
That's a significant part of the population. Men who have sex with men, gay men, account for more than half of all new infections. So the not being included in the World's AIDS Day coming out of the White House is significant. Providing treatment for HIV strains the budget in every state, so that there are many states that are looking at cutting the services that are being provided, such as the Medication Assistance Program, where it's 150% of poverty level so that you can afford the medications that keep you alive. People are still dying. Yeah, the drugs have made a great impact, but they don't work for everybody.
You
It's
have
not
to have
over.
information. We're not putting any information out there for people either, really.
And I'm one of those people who remembers that, you know, every month it was, who have I lost? You know, when I went to national and international conferences, you looked for who is no longer there. You know, it's lost that immediate sense of urgency. So as opposed to, you know, similar to very much other issues, we've become complacent.
Yep.
We've lost our voice. We've lost our anger. It's time to get it back.
Well, let's turn to Ghana, if we may. The president of Ghana, President Akufo-Addo, has made a statement recently in an interview with Al Jazeera. And it's provoked a response in the LGBT community, so I'd like to show you a clip of that interview right now.
Something you said a little earlier on about freedom of expression. So I want to ask you about what is happening in your country and homosexuality, for example, which I believe is illegal and it's punishable. I mean, why is homosexuality still illegal in your country?
The social, cultural issues, if you like. I don't believe that in Ghana so far a sufficiently strong coalition has emerged, which is having that impact on public opinion that will say, change it. Let's then have a new paradigm in Ghana.
Is that something you would get behind?
I think that it is something that is bound to happen. And when that happens...
What's going to provoke it? What's going to make it happen?
Oh, it's the activity, like elsewhere in the world. Like elsewhere in the world, the activities of individuals, of groups. I grew up in England. I went to school as a young boy in England, and I grew up at a time in England when homosexuality was banned there. It was illegal, and I lived a period when British politicians thought it was anathema even to think about changing the law, and then suddenly the activities of individuals, of groups, a certain awareness, a certain development grew and grew and grew stronger, and it forced a change in law. I believe that those are the same processes that will bring about changes in our situation. At the moment, I don't see that in Ghana there is that strong current of opinion that is saying this is something that we need to even deal with. It's not so far a matter which is on the agenda.
Now, what I like about the interview is that he encourages activism. And as we just heard, said activism will promote change. Members of the LGBT community in Ghana are very happy with his comments. They congratulated him for his empathic response on discrimination against homosexuals in Ghana. The LGBTQI Association hinted that in response, they would have a peaceful march in Accra to thank him. Consistent with our calm demeanor, there will be a peaceful movement walk on Friday, the 15th of December, 2017, to thank President Akufo-Addo and his government and the present mission and vision of the LGBTQIA movement. Excerpts of their statement reads, this statement that you just heard caused a stir. Of course, religious groups were outraged. The Christian Council has argued that legalizing homosexuality has the potential of ripping off the family culture of Ghana, and that same-sex marriage is a deadly threat to Ghana. Its conservative society has seen the gay community mostly silent and in hiding as cases of stigma and brutality abound. Being gay in Ghana comes with grave challenges, with the most brutal and deadly being mob justice, a development which continues to see the LGBT community in Ghana always in hiding. With this bold step taken, it remains uncertain if many more gay men in Ghana could take the challenge or risk leaving their country to live the life that they so wish to live. So they still have to leave, even though the president has made this conservative statement. Is this the end of my segment?
I think it might be.
Okay, well,
And Emma now.
I know it, but I have two sad. This Moscow woman was beaten up coming from the conference, she and her friend. Acid was thrown at her. It didn't, I mentioned this last time, it didn't blind her. And then there have been 2 deaths in Peshawar, Pakistan, murders of transgender women. So, having said that, let's move to an interview that I was honored to conduct with Emma Schoenberg of Rights and Democracy. Hi, I'm here with Emma Schoenberg of Rights and Democracy, and we're here to talk about her work, the movement, and many other things. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I understand that you're a Montpelier girl. Is this true?
I am. I'm born and raised here, and I lived here for almost the entirety of my life.
Really? You went to college here? Or?
Yeah. Well, I went to college at UVM, right? So not that far away, and then afterwards came back here and worked in agriculture for a couple of years.
What'd you do?
I worked at a couple of vineyards in the area and a couple of veggie farms. Was a gardener for a while.
How long have you been involved with Rights and Democracy?
Well, I started as a volunteer, and Rights and Democracy is a leadership development organization.
Thank you.
Yeah, which is a which means that they seek out people who share our values, who are doing good work, and then do intentional building of their leadership through training and through relationship building. And I got to experience that as a volunteer. So one day I just came, and then all of a sudden I was tabling with Rights and Democracy, and then one day I was, I think, getting drinks with folks in Rights and Democracy, and by developing that relationship, got to know the organization better.
About how long ago was this?
This was right before the election, I believe. I had taken a little bit of a break from activism. I'd gone back by working at VPIRG, so that was another chapter in my Montpelier life. And then while working at VPIRG, started volunteering with Rights and Democracy through electoral work and through a lot of the movement building that they were doing, and breaking out of my environmental silo that I'd been in for a long time, which was a really important moment for me.
What led you to Rights and Democracy?
A friend of mine had been doing work with them, and they had this campaign called Energy Democracy, which is now one that I work on. And Energy Democracy was much more than just passing progressive legislation for environmental regulation. It was bigger and kind of looked at the decision-making process around energy. And that was fascinating to me. So I think I started going through that. I went to an Indigenous Peoples Day rally with Rights and Democracy. And then it kind of built from there as I discovered all the rest of the work that they were doing, especially $15 minimum wage.
Oh, yes. Is there anything that drew you as a cis queer woman? That's how you identify, right?
That is how I identify.
Why Rights and Democracy?
I have never organized as a queer person before. I've considered it a smaller part of my identity, and it's been a process to come out slowly, and it's even a more recent conversation that I've started having as a public identification. So bringing queerness into my organizing has been a process that I've been doing with Rights and Democracy, and it's been a comfortable space. In terms of why I was drawn to it in general, and I think as someone who has different levels of intersecting oppression on her life, it was a movement building organization. As opposed to just passing advocacy, it was also doing that political education. And I think that's really important when we're making space and lifting up the voices of others.
So it's grassroots.
It's grassroots.
And that's important.
And that is important. And even more than grassroots, because grassroots just means talking to friends and neighbors. It's the target, if you will. It's that, oh yeah, I'm talking to my friends and neighbors to pass, act, yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to that deeper political education and those building of relationships through the organizing teams that Rights and Democracy has, that's building a movement that includes passing legislation, but also means that relationship building side of it as well. Some of those larger conversations.
Now, I understand you're the education and you're interested in the education and training curriculum of Rights and Democracy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about that, please?
I'd love to tell you about that.
Very good.
It's something that I'm pretty passionate about and has been a project that I've been working on pretty much since I joined RAD. So RAD is the acronym.
Yes.
So when I joined, there wasn't really a training curriculum. Some of it was there for the electoral work. We still do have a really excellent movement politics training, which is all centered on people who are interested in running for office or supporting people running for office. But some of that larger political theory, and again, I go back to that movement building side of it, was kind of what you picked up along the side. And through other organizing experiences, I knew that training and education can be one of the most empowering experiences we can have. So I started building a curriculum based around RAD's idea of whole movement organizing. Whole movement organizing is the complexity that I'm trying to get across, where there's electoral organizing and community organizing, and also trying to pass legislation while you're at it, and how all of those things blend together. So the training, it's originally an 8-hour long training, and we've started breaking it up into smaller, more bite-sized pieces as we work on this curriculum. And they focus on some of the theory that goes behind that, the political education, some of the lessons from the past and other organizing movements from the 80s and the 70s and the 60s that we can learn from, and then some of the hard skills that it actually takes to go out there and organizing, which is community power mapping and door knocking and calling your legislator. So it's a good blend, and that's something that I've been really passionate to see come into fruition in the last 6 months.
So it started as an 8-hour session in one day?
It did. I got a lot of feedback that nobody's going to want to attend an 8-hour long training, which I understand.
Yeah.
Also, when you're organizing people who have very little time.
And yeah,
it's a
need
very
to work.
Yeah, need to work and have families. It's a very large ask to get them to commit that much time. Yeah.
So how have you re-envisioned it, or how are you going to do it now?
Right. Well, part of it, my dream, and we'll see if this happens, and if anyone wants to join an organizing team in all of Vermont, now I'll look at the camera and say that, join an organizing team anywhere in Vermont, or start one.
Rights and Democracy Organizing Team? Is that?
Yeah, we're in almost every county at this point. We're getting there. Northeast Kingdom is our last stretch for sure. But my idea is that these will start integrating into what an organizing team actually does. So much of what we do is we sit around and we say, what do we do? And it could be organizing to influence the legislature and to call representatives or to run an electoral campaign. What also could be doing is educating friends and neighbors. Inviting your friends over for a meal and doing a 2-hour-long rights and democracy training. I think that would be really cool. And all of this can be either the movement building or the lessons from the past or some of the hard skill ones, and they're pop-outable. So that would be the dream in the long run. And we're not that far from achieving that.
I'm a retired teacher, so who's
Okay.
on your reading list?
Who's on my reading list?
Paulo Freire is.
Yes.
Is.
Yeah, so...
Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Yeah, which I'm currently re-listening to on audiobook. It's a very good audiobook if you're interested. So yeah, a lot of the experiential education is something that I'm pretty passionate about. Trainers for Change, which is an organization out of Philadelphia, just came to Vermont with 350, and they do excellent work in that area. We're collaborating with them. I read a lot from Mark and Paul Engler, who are two sociologists who have looked at nonviolent revolutions for the past several hundred years and really distilled it into a lot of what momentum organizing, they call it, is. And that's building momentum through disruptive campaigns and direct actions. So taking a couple of the lessons that they've drawn and building that alongside structural organizing. If anyone hasn't read Saul Alinsky, that's a good primer to start. There's a lot about power and self-interest there, and really how to build your own power and also the organization's power. And so by blending those two, it's really important to get that as a whole movement theory across.
So do you assign readings or just incorporate them into your workshops?
I would love to start assigning readings.
Would anybody read them?
But would anyone read them? Yeah, and part of the training mentality, it's a little bit different.
Oh, sure.
And bringing in some of that experiential education is that it's based through activities. And I believe deeply that we can be our own experts and that we have a lot of collective experience. So as much as I want to say, like, read these amazing authors and hear what they have to say, I'll spend an equal amount of time being like, what has your experience been? Because we've all experienced depression in some way or another, and if we can tease out how that's acted in our life and how we've organized others in our lives, whether that's in the movement or not, I can believe that can be equally as powerful as just reading a book.
Yeah. Combined, right?
Yeah, but both, right? The answer is always both. I'm going to tattoo that to my forehead at some point.
Well, I think you have. Can you tell us how long Rights and Democracy has been in existence and how active it's been in Vermont?
Yeah.
Give us a little background about that, please.
And from a movement or organization building perspective, it's pretty fascinating because Rights and Democracy is a baby of an organization. It's 2 years old. And it swelled incredibly quickly because it happened to start around the same time that Bernie Sanders announced for president. It'd been around for, I think, about 6 months before that. But it really was caught on that tide and lifted up and really came about because of paid family and medical leave. And the first staff members of Rights and Democracy, my coworkers, Elise and Isaac, they knocked on thousands of doors in, I think it was a February or January. It was incredibly cold. They knocked on thousands of doors, and through that built basically what is an email list. And through that, that's when you get your initial contacts and we can start organizing. And Rights and Democracy really started out of a lot of the work that the Worker Center had done around the Healthcare as a Human Right campaign and the difficulty in implementing Act 48, which was universal health care. And some of the lessons that were taken from that were used in building Rights and Democracy. And we would actually be absolutely nowhere without that movement building and relationship building and campaign strategy that came out of the Worker Center and the phenomenal activists that did work there on the Healthcare as a Human Right campaign. So in a way, Rights and Democracy is young, and in a way it's a little bit older than that too.
And now you're involved with Raise the Wage.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, the Raise the Wage to $15 an hour, it's not an uncomplicated topic. It's progressive legislation that's being worked on in many, many states. And we are an affiliate of People's Action, which is a national organization working on $15 minimum wage, which has a bit of an advantage. We can learn a lot of lessons on the national scene and apply them to Vermont. Sometimes a disadvantage, because Vermont's a unique place.
Do you have an event coming up apropos of Raise the Wage?
We have a couple of events coming up, and if I could recall my calendar at the top of my head, we have a phone bank in a couple of weeks. That's going to be the big, task that we're asking people to do is hop on the phones and really get the message out there. And I should mention, $15 minimum wage is bundled into 3 different legislative bills that we call Raise Up Vermont, and that the Raise the Wage Coalition is about 30 organizations, and Rights and Democracy is just one of them. Raise Up Vermont is worker misclassification, it's paid family and medical leave, which still needs to get through the Senate, though it is in the House, and $15 minimum wage. And we think that's a really strategic choice because just passing a $15 minimum wage isn't going to make the desperate impact that it's needed for low-wage workers. It's going to help many, many people, but it needs to also address all the other injustices that are happening in our worker class in Vermont.
Are you finding a lot of resistance?
Resistance from the right people, is what I'll say. It's amazing how business doesn't seem to want to get involved.
Yeah.
Though the small businesses that are engaged in this campaign are some of the most, there are businesses with a lot of integrity who understand that workers are their common denominator and have to treat workers well. So some like medium to large businesses are a little bit more difficult to get on board, that's for sure.
Let me ask you a couple of more things before we go. I understand there's an LGBT caucus forming in Rights and Democracy. Is this true? And can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit earlier. We have organizing teams across the state.
Yes.
And as they build their own communities, we encourage as much autonomous action as possible. So one of our organizing teams in Bennington, Vermont, has started their own LGBTQ working group. A lot of others have a lot of queer folks visible and present in them and haven't actually started a caucus. And it's really driven by the interest of the members themselves. And I personally, up in Burlington, am trying to start a consistent conversation about how we can bring queer folks more to the center of our movements, and doing that through creating spaces for them, like a film screening, et cetera, et cetera.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Is there any last thing you want to tell us as we draw the interview to a close?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you for coming. We hope to
Excellent.
see you again.
Yeah, you have a lovely evening.
You too.
That was a good interview.
Oh, thank you.
it's
Emma was
really-
very
The
it's
nice.
interview was very good. I liked
Yes.
it.
Well, it's nice to see
Yeah.
this growing sense of activism in our youth because we've mentioned before we were concerned about who's coming up next.
Yes, that was good.
So, we were wrong
Yes,
in our
we
answer to
were.
the trivia
Yes, we
question,
were.
but we had the same answer. The first major American film to deal with AIDS was broadcast on NBC November 11th, 1985. It was called An Early Frost. And it focused around a young man who was an attorney who not only needed to come out to his parents that he was gay because they didn't know, but that also he was diagnosed with AIDS. And the movie did
I don't think
a
I
good,
saw that.
I saw it.
It did I mean, I still get choked up thinking about it. It did a very nice job of the family conflict and an ambulance coming to transport him to a medical facility and the ambulance crew refusing to provide treatment. So it told you all the social issues. So with that, you can say goodnight?
Well, certainly. I think it's time for us to wrap it up. So thank you for joining us.
And don't forget,
Resist.
resist.